Welcome to Writers Not Writing, a show where I interview authors about the ways they procrastinate and highlight artists who are using their voices to push back against fascism. I'm Benjamin Gorman, your friendly author in exile, and the quiet guy behind the glass there is Doug the producer. I write novels and collections of poetry and stuff. Doug does his best to try to make me sound better. Welcome to Writers Not Writing. You're going to enjoy today's show. And if you want a little more, become a patron of my Patreon, and you'll get access to an ad-free version of the show with a bonus segment with each interviewee. Even free members get that, but let's keep that a secret.
If I take my time.
Hail and well met, readers and reviewers. Welcome to Writers Not Writing. I'm very excited to be here today with M.K. Martin. M.K. Martin is an author and editor. Her works appear in literary journals and several anthologies, and her novels Survivors Club, Ashfall, and New Avalon Rangers, which, as you are listening to this, has just appeared today or this week. That is available on the 22nd. Martin is a restless world traveler, started writing young. She was an exchange student in Paraguay, joined the U.S. Army, deployed to Afghanistan, to Iraq, and currently lives in Ireland, where she indulges her deep love of tea. And you can find out more about her on mkmartinwriter.com. So I have been so excited to have you here. You've been working on a lot of stuff, and one of the things is you've been doing some editing work for Strong Women's Strange Worlds. What all does that entail?
Yeah, so I've been doing some editing work actually separate from Strong Women, Strange World. Sorry, I think I might have said those two things together. So the editing work is I've had a couple of freelance clients that I've been editing for, and I won't mention any names because I don't have their permission. And one of the writers through NotAPipe that I've been able to edit her book, which is just an amazing opportunity for me to get paid to read other people's books, which is like, I always feel like this job is such a like it's just almost a con, because you're like, hey, what if you paid me to read your book?
But it is, I mean, I'm speaking from the publisher side. Your work is incredibly valuable. Like, those books are better as a consequence. It's worth it. But yes, I know of whom you speak, and I can tell you that I just finished the next in the series a couple of days ago, and that this particular writer we're both discussing without naming writes in a genre that's not normally my style. Like, your books are way more my wheelhouse. Like, sci-fi, and we've got action, and and this author writes more I don't want to give anything away, but it's cozier, right?
It's cozy. I think we can probably, there's enough cozy books out there we can say cozy without
revealing anything. But that has been an interesting experience for me to kind of broaden my taste, to go, oh, I didn't realize how much I would enjoy this. And I have enjoyed it's not, if we don't solve this problem, the world ends. And that's there was another book by a different author that was something like Axes and Lattes or something like that.
Yeah. It's not Dungeons and Lattes, but I know what you're talking about.
Similar, yeah, about a barbarian who starts a coffee shop, and it is the same thing where it's just the stakes are, will this former fantasy hero be able to successfully essentially retire and start a coffee shop? Will the coffee shop succeed? And it was so much fun. And so then when this author that we're talking about started writing fantasy cozies, I was primed. But yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed getting into that world of lower, especially in our world, like maybe sometimes lower stakes is healthy. Now, you've also been involved with Strong Women's Strange Worlds, so that was...
Yeah.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, so that was a really fun group that I kind of had just found through social media, and I'd seen a couple of the different NotAPipe authors that had been featured on Strong Women's Strange Worlds, and I thought, oh, okay, I've got to do some kind of marketing or something like that. And it just so happened that I had a story coming out in the Antifa Lit anthology journal, So the first version of that, which the second volume is completely funded through Kickstarter. So I'm really excited about that. Yeah.
Yes, that was huge. Thanks to everyone out there who backed that Kickstarter. That was cool. So that was the story you read for Stronger than Strange Worlds.
Yeah, and that was actually a fun, I guess I'll say I could call that editing for them because I had to take a story that I think it was 9 pages in the anthology and cut it down to 4 pages. And originally I thought, I'll just take a segment out of it, but I couldn't find any one piece that I felt like that, like 4 pages of that could stand alone. So then I thought, what if I just trimmed, half of the story off and see what happens?
Yeah.
Um, and could it still hold together? And I feel like it was coherent enough.
Well, that story,
But it,
I don't want to give too much away. No spoilers for folks who've not read the Antifa-led journal, but it's such a great story. And my co-editor, my wife Chris, her response to it was, "I want this to be an entire novel." Like
oh,
the 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 it presents this kind of situation and these characters who are we want it did a very good job of leave them wanting more, right? Like, oh, this dilemma, this quandary they're in. She wanted to go, is this character going to evolve even more as she realizes how privileged she has been? And it's a great story. So folks who have not read the Antifa Lit Journal, yeah, the MK Martin story in there is excellent. That was one of the big winners. So people,
oh, yay! Thank you.
um, so how has that all that editing practice changed you as a writer?
Um, I think, all that editing practice, I think it does make me one, like I said, it just feels like a con of, I get paid to read other people's stories. And then it does really play to what my spouse said is two of my strengths, which is one, um telling people what to do, and secondly, always being right. So
Yes,
so being an editor, you're always right and you get to tell other people what to do. So that's brilliant. Plus you get paid to read other people's stories.
right.
Um, so I think for me as an editor, reading somebody's story that deeply, and then I'll what I often do is I'll give myself a first pass where I kind of just make notes for myself. And then once I'm done, I'll go through, and if I have questions that I have marked out or things I have noted that haven't been resolved by the end, then I'll go back and, delve into those a little bit more. But sometimes I'll put in a question, is why did he do such and such? And then, a paragraph later that question will be answered. So then I'll take that question out. But when I do that, what I'm learning to do is kind of to trust my instinct as a writer of, you know, does this go someplace? This seems like it's foreshadowing something. Is there a payoff? And so it makes me as the writer be more mindful when I'm putting little bits and pieces in where I'm like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if there were ninjas in chapter 3? And then those ninjas actually have to mean something by the end of the book. They can't just be there because it would be cool.
I had
Um,
in the editing of the novel that's going to come out in October. I was going through the process. I got through to whatever chapter 7 and realized I'd teed up this plot line and never returned to it. And
oh,
it's just one of those, oh no, I need to do a lot of revision because I thought this was going to be something that would solve a problem. That novel's pretty complicated in terms of the number of characters, and it's each
mhm.
to another place. And in one of them, we skip to this other place and we start this plot line, and I just had forgotten about it.
And he just kind of it drops and
So yes, that process of going through and finding does this well, and I was doing a video rant, just a brief one this couple weeks ago about one of the challenges we have as fiction writers is we understand those kind of rules of storytelling. You don't want to leave your reader feeling betrayed and going, "Oh, okay, nothing will come of this." And yet we
yeah.
that is chaotic, where more so than ever in my life before, things are teed up and never pay off. Like the world makes less sense than I feel like than ever before in my life, where it's like, this is poorly written.
I know the writers of this season have just gone off the rails.
We really have this, yeah, especially
I
our
mean,
jumped.
You know, at least it wasn't the year of everything's on fire and we have a pandemic and there's murder hornets,
Right.
because that was a strange year.
Yeah, but
Um,
the murder hornets never came back. There was never any payoff to that. It was, hey,
I
this
know.
city's on fire. Oh wait, no, the city's not really on fire. This is and then well, but I give Portland credit. Those folks are still out there fighting against the feds now in the
Mm.
city, but there is not a coherent narrative. It feels very reactionary, which is one of the things I wanted to ask you about. We're in this era of, you know, clearly rising fascism. What are some of the things you've been doing as a writer to use your voice to push back?
Um, so I mean, one, the short story in the Antifa Lit Journal. And I very much struggle with short stories. So every time I write a short story, I feel like it should turn into an epic,
Right.
Wheel of Time-esque 12-book series that probably Brandon Sanderson will have to finish after my death. Um, and so I was like, no, I want to write a short story. I want to be involved in this. And this is something that I can do. And also, I mean, yourself, being somebody who has left the US, it creates an extra layer of complicated feelings because, there's some survivor's guilt. There's, I have privilege. I was able to leave. Should I have stayed? Should I have fought harder? Should I have done more? There's all of those feelings. And there's also thoughts of, you know, if I did stay, could I do more good there than if I had left, and could be, not worried about my safety every moment of the day, not worried about my family's safety every moment of the day. And the fact that we have to consider that as Americans is, you know, I mean, it's still shocking for me, and I've had a couple of years to get used to the idea. Um, but so there's kind of all of that, and so what can I do? Just kind of the scrabbling around of what can I do? What can I do? So one of the things that, and I know it's not a lot, but I've been still contacting the representatives, because the way that it works when you move out of the U.S. is kind of your last U.S. address is your address in the U.S., your functional address in the U.S. So I've still been contacting my representatives and using it as kind of a form of therapy of like, I am really upset about this, and I'm going to tell you about it, and you're going to hear about it in detail. Because I'm a writer, and that's what I do is I get upset and then I just write stuff down. And writing the short story, and then the other thing is, and I love this because it's from World War II, and we put it together ourselves. So during World War II, movements like the French resistance, the underground, things like that, and not just the French, but we kind of know about them primarily. But pretty much every country that was occupied by the Nazis during World War II had some form of resistance. And so there is. I'll share the link. Maybe Ben, you can share the link in the podcast. There's this wonderful little manual called the Simple Sabotage Field Manual, and it gives examples. And now, bear in mind, this is from like the 1930s and 40s. So some of them are a bit dated, but it gives examples of things that you can do when you're under a fascist regime, you're being occupied by a fascist regime, or one has taken over your country, that you can sabotage that regime. And so, for example, I just pulled up the bit for office workers. So it says, for example, make mistakes in quantities of materials when you are copying, confuse similar names and use wrong addresses, prolong correspondence with government bureaus, misfile essential documents. In making copies, make one too few so that extra copying jobs will have to be done. Tell important callers the boss is busy or talking on another line. Hold up the mail until the next collection, and spread disturbing rumors that sound like insider information. And so all of these things are, you just think of yourself as just this bumbling,
Yeah.
just incompetence. It's death of a thousand cuts, because the thing that we have, the thing that we can do is not, none of us are enough that we can single-handedly take down a fascist regime. We just can't. but all of us can do our little contribution. And I think the thing that happens is a lot of times we look at the problem and it's so huge, we can't solve it. So we just give up and do nothing.
Yeah.
But, you know, having somebody call and say, is so and so available? And you're like, look at them. Clearly they are. Nope. Call back later. Dude,
Well,
that's something that you can do.
and to bring some joy too. I mean, I think that there is, it can, it can be a source of such despair and grind.
Mm-hmm.
Or there, I'll be talking to friends back home, and they're just like, I don't know what to do, and I'm just, oh, here is a fun way to do something that's a little subversive, and that little subversion reminds you, I'm fighting back. I'm fighting
Yep.
back in the way that and so that's a great idea. I will absolutely put that in the show notes, and folks can check that out and think about what are some little ways. There are also a lot of little ways to say no, and saying no is
Mm-hmm.
standing out on a street corner with a sign. And so little acts of, just expressing, I reject this system right now. Some of those can be very small, but they are really hard. Do you refuse to go to a state park? Well, the state parks are under attack. Do you
Mm-hmm.
keep your kids out of public schools because the public schools are a government entity, but they're under attack as well. So those are really, really tough kind of decisions that I know people are having to make, that are, yeah, we noped a lot by being able
Yeah.
to, okay, we're just going to, get out. And that is one way, but I recognize that is not for everybody. So, um,
Well, and I think the other thing is to kind of bear witness as well. Like being outside of the US, we're in a position that sometimes people can tell us things that they can't say out loud in the US. Like I have people that contact me and they say, I can't, I'm afraid to post things on my social media account now. And I'm like, I will post whatever you want
yep.
because I'm here and I'm safe. And if you feel that this information needs to be out there, I can put it out for all the good that that may or may not do, and we can have a lot of discussion about that.
But I think it is valuable. Like it's the amalgamation of so many voices, right? And so even if that person says, I can't post it, but I want to, will you post this? And then we can say, a friend of mine in the United States didn't feel comfortable sharing this, but hey, you should know the person who's living next door to you may be feeling this. And then somebody else can go, oh yeah, I'm sharing that out as well. This is the thing. I think when you made a point about safety and worrying about our families, and I don't know if you've experienced this as well in Ireland, but we were talking before the show about, the kind of general sense of safety we can have in here in Europe. I don't think Americans fully appreciate the way they've accepted a constant level of potential violence and danger in their society. It really is remarkably freeing to be able to go, the people around me are not armed. Like, it makes, I don't, have you felt that where you're just like,
Yes. Oh my God.
but the
We
person is not going to attack me because of what I put on Facebook. And if they do, they don't have a gun.
Yeah. Oh my God, it's such a big difference. We were talking, kind of we have these discussions fairly frequently with our Irish friends. The whole why did you move here? But why here? Why this part of the country? Um And so we'd kind of been sharing our experiences and some of the things that had prompted us to come over. And the safety was a big factor. Things like, I was just listing off the places where there have been mass shootings. And, kind of everybody is well aware of the school shootings. But then I'm like, it's schools, it's concerts, it's grocery stores, it's nail salons, it's places of worship, it's sporting events. It's, just, it would be shorter to almost list the places where a mass shooting hasn't happened. um and people being attacked in their own homes because they look a certain way or they speak a certain language, or their neighbor decides that they don't appreciate the bumper sticker that they have in their car. And like like that level of being just constantly on alert. And what it reminds me the most of is when I was deployed to a combat zone of just, and not even that, because sometimes you know, we would be on very high alert when we were off the base. But once we got back onto the base, we had a reasonable sense of of safety. You know, obviously we still got mortared, and occasionally there would be a sniper. But like in, and I say that, you know, so casually, but like,
But you knew what direction it was coming from.
yeah, and you also felt safe enough. You're like, at this part of the base, I'm gonna be safe. I can just kind of, you know, tune out for a few hours. I can sleep in my bed, and there's only like a 5% chance that I'll get blown up in the middle of the night, which is low enough that I'm okay with it. Um, but then the feeling when we were off the base of constantly, you're just constantly watching everything all the time. And I remember going to the grocery store in the US and just looking around, you know, doing the rooftop checks, looking around in the parking lot to see like, are there any people getting anything, you know, that they've got big coats on, or they, you know, because sometimes in the US also you'll just see them walking in with, you know, an arsenal strapped to their body,
Yep.
because apparently Starbucks is a terrifying place, and you know, you might need several guns to go there.
Well,
And
one of
so
those.
I'd be looking before I even went into some place. I'd be looking around constantly, and then when I'm in, you know, whatever business I'm in, I'm also kind of anytime the door is opening, I'm just looking to see who it is. Like, oh, is that a mass shooter coming in? Am I going to have to duck and cover? How close to the exit am I? Can I get behind something that would maybe stop a bullet?
Yeah.
um and you, but you're doing it all the time, and you sort of, you know, it's that boiling frog sort of thing where after a while you're just like, oh, this is every new level of caution, you get used to it, and then when you leave, you just, when that weight is off of you, you're like, oh, whoa.
Oh,
it's
we
like
live that way.
it's like getting out of an abusive relationship. You're trying to describe to people what it was like, and they're like, why would you live like that? And you're like, I don't know.
Why did we? And I very much bought into. I was deceived into believing the kind of part of the American mythos of, oh well, the Second Amendment protects the First. Like if everybody's armed, then the government will not.
Wouldn't that be fantastic if that was the case?
Learning the history. The Second Amendment was never really about protecting the First Amendment. It was about maintaining slavery. Like this is, you know, like once you understand this is where that came from. It was, you know, so that the white male landowners can maintain slavery and kill Native Americans. It was, but we bought into this I bought into this propaganda that the Second Amendment was really important. And once you get away from the United States and see, oh, people can have far more robust political discussions if they're not constantly worried. If I say the wrong thing, half the people in here are armed and psychotic. Like, it does
Mm,
not maintain free speech. It is detrimental to free speech to live in a place where there is so much potential for violence. And here, you know, people will meet, you know, for a date, and the first thing they'll talk about is their politics because that's okay.
mhm,
It's safe. And you know, whereas the discourse in the US is so polarized and toxic and exists within this milieu of, oh, and it's dangerous. And I think that's why a
mhm,
lot of people then go, I'm going to check out. I don't want to talk politics.
mhm.
Talk politics, or do you not want to feel unsafe right now? You know, it gets us away from talking about policy to, I'm just going to tell you my team and hopefully I'm safe if I just talk about my team rather
Yep.
than nuance, you know? Yeah, that's when we first moved here to Barcelona, my family was, you know, the people would say, "Oh, you're going to move to this neighborhood or that neighborhood." And of course, we're looking for the cheapest possible neighborhood to live in, and so we ended up in a neighborhood that was predominantly, you know, migrants, you know, immigrants like us from you know, North Africa, places like that. And some of the folks here in Spain would go, "That's a really dangerous neighborhood. You're living in a
Mm,
really dangerous neighborhood." And I, you know, was like, "Okay, I need to learn. I'm not from here. You know, what is the big danger?" It's that you could have somebody take your phone. That's the big danger. It's a
mhm.
dangerous neighborhood because there's lots of people stealing phones and
There's
potentially,
just there's some, okay,
yeah,
there's some petty theft.
maybe
You're
theft,
like you're
but
like, "Oh, but there isn't like mass shootings every few days."
the
Nothing like that.
yeah, no murder. You know, somebody may pick your pocket, which
Mm.
happened to us, and that makes a neighborhood a very dangerous neighborhood. And so adjusting to that
I
level
mean,
of,
I love that for you.
yep, it's like, oh, people can choose to live this way. Like also the police here, and I don't know if you've experienced this in Ireland, it's a very different model. We'll see
Mm,
like a mental health crisis, and there's like five police officers around them, no guns drawn. They're just standing around them, protecting them from themselves.
hmm.
Well, somebody from a social worker, and there's an ambulance, and they're helping the person. It's not about confrontation, and the police
Yeah.
are giving people directions. Like it's not, de-escalation is just part of the culture. Like we're
But
here to help you and not to have authority over you in any way. It's been an interesting change.
oh yeah. So the police here, they're called the Gardaí, on Garda Síochána. So they're the guardians of the peace is
Yeah.
their job. Um, and they don't even have weapons. I mean, they have like I think they have a baton and they have pepper spray or mace. And if there are separate, it's kind of like their SWAT team, and they do have weapons, but that is a special unit that only gets called out on very rare occasions, and they have to go and request them and kind of get them out and sort of that thing. But the average police officer that you would see walking around, I mean, they don't have guns, and so they do. There's also, I will say, because Ireland is, I mean, it's the size of a mid-sized state in the US and doesn't have a huge population. And a lot of people, there's such a really strong sense of community that I think some of that tends to keep people in line just because, if you are acting up too much, well, the guard is not going to even have to do anything with you. They're just going to call your mom or call your aunt or, mention something to somebody that they know and that'll get back to your. So then, there's a lot of things that are kind of dealt with through social means rather than through law enforcement means of like, look, this person is going down a bad road, and rather than, throwing them into some system and now they're tagged and you know for the rest of their life, they're going to be like, hey, we're going to talk to different members of the community and see what we can do to put them on a different path.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, one of the things that, a lot of negative interactions with police, and I don't speak from personal experience because cishet white guy, I didn't have a lot of negative interactions with the police in the United States, but most of the negative interactions I've learned about, seen, I think can be attributed to the fact that the police officers in the United States feel like they have to maintain a certain level of authority and respect or else
Hmm.
they're not safe. And you can kind of see, oh, the officer got scared that this
Hmm.
person was not showing them a sufficient amount of respect. And if they weren't shown a lot of respect all the time, they were going to be harmed. And that's a really dangerous kind of toxic loop because then
Hmm.
why should I go into this profession? Because I'll get a lot of respect, because I'll need
Yeah.
respect all the time. Okay, well, then it attracts people who are like, I need authority all the time.
Hmm.
It's not the kind of folks who go into that line of work because here they're not demanding respect all the time. They're going, how can I help? The people around me and not posture. And if you,
Yeah, yeah, it's a very different mindset. It comes from a mindset of service rather than a mindset of you know sort of belligerent authority.
but I'm sympathetic to the fact that I think for a lot of officers, it's I must have that belligerent authority,
Yeah.
or the person could shoot me, and that's just
Well, and to be fair, so many Americans are armed that is, it's not an unrealistic concern.
yeah.
Um, yeah,
I,
it's not a problem that's going to get solved easily.
Yeah, no, yeah. I mean, I think that interaction between, the need for respect and fear, like those are connected.
Mm.
And
I I will say again, kind of going back to my own experiences being deployed and being in combat zones. And one of the things that our team did was we did a lot of talking to locals in different locations, and yeah, we had our body armor on and we had our helmets with us, but the body armor, it's not especially up close. And so we would be, having a lot of face-to-face interactions with people who potentially, could have had weapons, who potentially could have wanted to kill us. At one point, all of the members of my team had various bounties on our head from the, local whoever's. And Um, and never once in all of those interactions did we treat people who, like, according to everything that we're at war. So we're at war. These are, potentially enemy combatants, and we never treated those enemy combatants with the kind of like disrespect and violence that Americans are being subjected to from their police force. So I that is one of the few things that I do push back a lot of times when cops say, oh, I felt threatened. And I'm like, dude, listen up. There are 17-year-olds who go into war zones every single day who are legitimately threatened by people who actually want to kill them. And they don't react as violently as you are reacting right now to people who don't want to kill you, who just want to go home. That's it.
Yeah.
And, so I mean, yeah, it there is a potential that police could be shot. There's a lot of guns in America that does happen. But I think every time it comes up, I'm like, but do
Yeah.
you need to be so violent? Do you need to shoot somebody when they're sitting in their car with both hands on the wheel and all they say is, I have a gun in the car?
Yeah.
I would say no.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. I think that culture of fear then leads to more violence, then
Hmm.
leads to more fear, then leads to, and if, you're living in a world where the people who are your people, the blue line, are constantly,
Yeah.
we have to do this in order to stay safe. It doesn't match with the stats. Like, it is safer to be a police officer than it is to be a toddler in the United States. They're not killed in the line of duty as often as civilians. And yet there is this, constant fear. And then that leads to situations that actually cause more danger, right?
Hmm.
You know, part of keeping yourself safe is building those human connections, right?
Well, and that's one of the big pieces that's missing is they don't eh, police don't feel like they're working for the community or working with the community. It feels like they're working against the community. I mean, I know very few people who, in a bad situation would see a police car coming and think, "Oh, good, the police are here.
I'll be safer now. Right.
I'll be safer now." Like, you see the police coming and you're like, "Oh, this is about to get 10 times worse. Somebody's going to get hurt. Somebody's going to jail, and everybody's life is going to get worse." Whereas here, it's the opposite reaction. It's the, "Oh, good, the police are here. They'll sort everything out."
Right.
You
Right.
know.
That should be a goal, like for anybody in law enforcement or any kind of government. Hey, people should be able to see that you're working for the public, and that should be
Hmm.
transparent. We're here to help, and I think maybe probably this goes back to Reagan to some extent.
Yeah. Well, so I'll plug somebody else's podcast, which, I don't know if it's
Yeah.
okay to do, but there's a wonderful podcast called Behind the Bastards.
Oh yes.
And yeah, and they look into sort of the foundation of the Pinkertons and how the Pinkertons evolved and eventually became the modern police force as that we have in the US. And again, as with the Second Amendment, you kind of have this idea, the police motto, to protect and serve, and you're like, wow, that sounds really noble and great. And then you look into the history of it and you're like, is that really though what
Protect.
they're after? Yeah.
Yes.
Well, and also the number of various cases where the police have, gone all the way up as far as they could go to show I don't have a responsibility to actually intervene. Like, if somebody was getting murdered in front of a police officer, they don't have an obligation to protect you from being murdered. So you're like, well, then what are you getting paid to do? I don't really understand.
Yeah. I learned a few years ago the term propaganda, and it is remarkable.
Oh.
Media is saying, here are heroic police officers who, who would see a murder and would intervene. And we don't get the other side of the story, which is, but they don't have to. That the hero cop story that we're fed is fiction. That's part of the story that we're being told on TV every night when you sit down and watch network TV. And really, it's the true history and the lived experience doesn't make for good TV. It's, No, we let the crime go, and then later we investigated it, and it was a lot of paperwork, and it was really boring. And also, in the meantime, we may have made things worse. That's often the story. Um, so, one of the things I like to ask folks about in the context of what all we've been experiencing is the kind of right wing machine has been what they call flooding the zone, like
Mm.
much that is coming at us. What is something that you want folks to kind of focus on and notice in this time so that they don't miss this, particular story?
Um, so I think again, going back to kind of what I was talking about earlier is the sabotage, and none of us can do this on our own. Is we have to build community in a way that we never had before, because honestly, nobody is coming to save us. And this is something, I saw a headline the other day that said, if America could see what America is doing to America, America would invade America to save America from America. And it's like, yeah, yeah, like you're not wrong. You've got something there. Um, but in the line of that thinking, I was, then what we're left with is, yes, Americans do have to save Americans, but sometimes we can't save ourselves, but we can help other people. And if everybody is focused on, okay, what can I do, this little thing that I can do to help somebody else out, whether you're a white person who has all of the privileges that comes with that, and you can say, look, I can put myself in between whoever and people who are vulnerable because of my white privilege, or I'm a man and I can put myself between you know whoever and whoever's threatening them because of my privilege. So everybody has different capacities to help each other out, and just find what you can do and know that whatever you can do, and to whatever degree that you can do it, that is making things slightly better,
Yeah.
you know um and I think the community organizing is a big thing. Just what can you do in your place? What can you do to help the people around you day by day? Can you look around in your day and think, well, what's one thing that I can do to help somebody else have a better day? Can I donate to a food pantry? Can I give a little money to charity? And then again, always making sure it's a legitimate charity, and it's all of there is some mental labor that goes along with that, because there are some organizations that they'll come and ask for money, and then you find out this organization is actually doing more harm than good. So you do have to do a little bit of homework, but once you find, just pick a few and say, okay, this is a cause that I care about, and I'm going to find a good organization. I'm going to save up my change and once a month donate $5 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Like, all of us can do our little things.
Well, and think about it as an act of resistance, and enjoy it, which can sometimes be things that feel like their intention, but feel good about the small thing you did because that helps you do more. Victories lead to victories, right? And
Yep.
recognize I am standing up today by giving money to the food pantry, and don't feel like, oh, it's such a small thing, I didn't do anything. No, you had a victory for some folks today. They had a meal as a family because you gave money or you gave food to that food bank. That's a victory. And also, in the same way that victories lead to victories, your engagement leads to more engagement. And there's been some really good research that, like, recycling, for example, doesn't actually help the planet very much, but recycling primes the people who are engaged in sorting their garbage into then voting for candidates who actually will make the, do much bigger things for
Hmm.
environment. So your engagement will really help you then support the people who are standing on the front lines, combating ICE, because you were giving to the food bank and you recognize now I'm on their side, right? And so, like, I think that's yeah, find those small things and feel good about the fact that you did a small thing.
And it's such a, I want to just emphasize it so much, that finding joy, because one of the things that repressive authoritarian regimes, fascist regimes, one of the things you'll see in almost all of them is a complete lack of joy. People feel ground down, people feel hopeless. people, are suffering, with good reason, a lot of mental health crises and various issues. And that's where that self-care piece comes in, to do whatever you need to do to keep that little light burning inside of you, so that you can then go forth and help other people. And sometimes that means, I got to write a silly story
Yeah.
that has nothing to do, maybe it's in no way political, it's not doing anything, but it makes me happy to write this silly little story.
Which then makes it a political act, right? Now I am preserving joy, and that's something the world needs. And yeah, and don't feel guilty about that. One of the political commentators I really appreciate often points out the side that is winning is the side that looks like it's having the most fun, and
Mm,
doesn't mean they're having the most transcendent, meaningful happiness. It means in that moment, they look like they're really enjoying themselves. And like you said, with a fascist regime, part of what is going on is grind everybody down so that the only joy they're allowed is at the rally, right?
mhm.
Go in here, dear leader, and you have this moment, and so it looks like you're in this moment of euphoria. Look at these folks; they're having so much fun.
The ecstasy of the 2-minute hate.
Right. Let's create a world where going to a political rally and hearing somebody talk about who to hate isn't the most fun you can have. Because that's a terrible world. That should a Trump rally should not be the most fun place anybody goes.
Mm.
um, so when all of this does grind you down, what has been a distraction that you've been able to go, okay, that's something that I've enjoyed lately?
So I have been, anticipating. There was a movie that was called Old Guard, and it's got Charlize Theron, um, and she's in it, and it's so amazing. It it ticks all of my boxes. It's got badass fighters. I know we're not supposed to
I
swear on this
saw the
podcast.
first one, and my reaction was I enjoyed it, but I thought this really needs more.
It really does. Yeah, you know the ending that I'm talking about, and the ending happens, and you're like, "Wait, what?" And then the it's the end of the movie, and you're like, "That cannot possibly be the end of the movie." And so now the second one is out,
I've not
and
seen it yet, but
yes,
so it is good. Have you seen it yet?
I have not. I was
Okay,
like I
good.
said, I was.
As
It's
soon as I saw it come across my Netflix, I was like, they made a two. Good. That one needs a two. There's
It so needed it too, and I've watched the trailer, but like I said, I was in Cork for the last week, and because we were in a family suite, I couldn't watch anything
yeah,
after a certain time of night.
yeah.
Um,
Maybe the axe wielding, Charlize Theron wouldn't have been great for the kids.
yeah, the try to reduce some of the trauma that they're
Yes.
getting. Um, yeah, so I was comforting myself with books because although Ireland has this amazing literary tradition, um, it doesn't have a lot of sci-fi and fantasy. Like, kind of, I'll go into bookstores here, and here's three walls of Irish history, and here's um the wall of three walls of poetry, and here's some literary fiction with an emphasis on Irish literary fiction. And they're incredibly, and rightfully so, incredibly proud of their literary tradition, but that literary tradition, despite Bram Stoker
Yeah.
being, having written Dracula, and, being inspired by the catacombs and around Dublin and things like that, doesn't include a lot of speculative. So you'll kind of go into the bookstores and you have all these shelves, and then there's one shelf of science fiction and fantasy combined. They're both on the same shelf, which,
Right.
oh, so most of the bookstores I'm picking through, and then it tends to only be like whatever the main bestsellers are that you could get anywhere. But if you want anything a little bit weird or quirky, or that's not one of the top, three or four bestsellers, you have to go to some of the bigger cities and bigger bookstores. So whenever I'm in Cork, I just go on a book buying extravaganza, and I finally got a couple of the books that had been on my to be read list, which was Someone You Can Build a Nest In.
Have you read it yet?
And I have, oh my goodness. I got through it in like a day and a half. It's one of those ones where I'm just going to read like a paragraph or two. And like 2 hours later, People are knocking on the door. They're like, "Do you want food?" And I'm like, "No."
Yeah. Yeah, I love that one so much, and you know, I decided that it was because of me that it got all the attention that it did, because this is not true at all. But I love that book, and I hopped online and I started, raving about it. And John Wiswell, the author, started
Mm,
following me and thanking me. And I will tell all of you listeners out there, do this if you are enjoying something. Kind of tell the world and communicate with the author. We love to hear, oh yeah, I really enjoyed your book. Like, we want to connect with readers. We write these things for you. And so he was very gracious, and in his response. Well, I became a member of SIFWA, and so I recommended it as my number one read for the year for SIFWA, and then he just won the Nebula. So I got to interview him, and I was like, I believe that I mean, he was nominated by tons of folks. It was not me, but I love to
mm.
think, oh yeah, I got the ball rolling for this great book.
No, totally. You should just claim that. That was just you. That
Yeah,
was all you.
I promoted this wonderful novel. No, it's so good, and he's got a new one. I think it just dropped, called "Wearing the Lion," where he retells
Mm,
the story of Heracles, but really more from the perspective of Hera
hmm
as a character who evolves over the course of the book. So she's not just the tormentor who makes his life miserable and then leaves, and we never go, why was she so awful to him? I mean, yeah, she was mad at Zeus, but okay. Like, no, she has to, I don't want to spoil too much. It's called Wearing the Lion, and it's
hmm
really fun. So if you enjoyed Someone You Can Build a Nest In, check out Wearing the Lion. You will like that one as well. His sophomore effort is not a sophomore slump at all. It's very good. So,
Nice. I think there's been a lot of kind of retellings of various like Greek and Roman mythologies that I'm I really am liking. Kind of like one of the things that I listened to my with my kiddo was the audiobook of gender swap Greek myths.
mm,
And yeah, that was an amazing kind of revelation. And it was really fun to see the women portrayed as like you are the active role, and then the men are like, and he was very handsome and everybody wanted to marry him because he was so handsome. And you're like, yeah, it doesn't feel nice when that's like your only attribute, does it?
yeah, well, and I mean, especially with Greek mythology, not only is, oh, he's really handsome, he's, you know, I mean, the quantity of sexual assault in Greek
Mm,
mythology is overwhelming. Like, when we would teach Greek mythology, we would say to high school students, let's acknowledge what is going on here. Like, this is
yeah.
sexual. Zeus just shows up and goes, "You're for me now." Like, and that was this. The gods are capricious and can do whatever they want. Power dynamic, but also it's a whole lot of SA in these stories.
Yeah, and obviously the one that I listened to, the version, it's geared for kids, so it's one of those things where they do gloss over like, you know, it's a lot of slight innuendo or, and then they fell in love and had a baby. And you're
Yeah,
like, "Oh, okay."
exactly. When two people love each other very much for it
Mm.
and have a child. Like, yes. Um, and then have you checked out Margaret Wells?
Oh, yeah, that was the other one I was gonna say is, also so Martha Wells, I've had this one,
Yeah,
because I'm trying to patronize libraries a lot more and also not spend my own money because 'cause
yeah.
I'm smart like that. Um, so I've had this one on my list for a long time is the All Systems Red, which is the first book in the Murderbot series, which, if you know, Apple TV has Murderbot, and I've been so tempted. I was like, "Oh, Apple TV is doing a lot of really great sci-fi lately," and I really wanna watch the series, but also I'm very snobby about things like that because I'm like, "I cannot possibly watch the series until I have read the book first." It
It
just can't
definitely is the
happen.
experience. You read the book and then you're like, then you can evaluate, oh, I like the choice that they made, or I didn't like this choice.
Yeah.
I
Yeah, then I can be insufferable twice because then I can watch it and be like, "Well,
know.
actually the book does this and this and this, and it's way better in the book."
Well, one of the things I was telling Chris that I'm super excited about watching that show because I've loved those books, and the character Murderbot is very much gender neutral, and
Mhm.
they couldn't go out and hire, okay, here is a robot without gender, and
Yeah.
didn't even try. Like they they
I
got
mean, I assume that Tilda Swinton is probably pretty busy
right,
because
yes.
she.
So yeah, they got the most masculine of actors, Alexander Skarsgård to play the part. So it would be interesting to see how he pulls off a part that where there's really no he to Murderbot. But yeah, I love those books. They're really fun, and there's some interesting debate about, is this character neurodivergent in a human way, or is it offensive that we're portraying these
Mm,
emotions through a robot? I don't, and so I think that's worth exploring. But I know a lot of neurodivergent folks love this character because they're like, oh, a character who isn't comfortable with eye contact, and I feel, maybe it's a bad pun in this case, but I feel seen by this
ugh.
character, right? So yeah, I'm excited to check out that show and see how it connects. But those how far are you through those books?
I just got it from the library, so I just started reading it because it was on a wait list. So the library here, they have a great system where if you have a library card anywhere, you have access to libraries throughout the whole country. You just request it, and they will ship you a book.
Yeah,
So you might have to wait a little bit, but you can get whatever book they have,
great.
you know.
Yeah, you will
And
love
I,
those. They're very they're stakes is a good way to think about it, because the some of the stories, it's like, oh, this is, this planet is kind of on the line, and then some of them it's
mm,
like, oh no, we're just going on this little mission, and it's not a sequence where it's,
yeah,
the book is higher stakes and the big, which not knocking it, I
it's not all ramping up to the great, intergalactic showdown.
but in this one it's really more character focused, and so it's, this is what I'm going through, and here I solve this problem that everything on this planet hinges on, and then we go to this other planet that's like a mining facility, and we find out something's going bad here, and so yeah, those are really really fun. I
Well, I'm looking forward to it. And the other one, I will say, this is just, and my kiddo's responsible for this, but the phenomena, the Netflix phenomena of K-pop demon hunters. Um, it's exactly what it sounds like,
So is it out of
and
Korea?
it's hmm?
So
Yeah.
it's out of Korea? Is it a Korean anime or?
I would say it's Western. So from reading the names of the voice actors, it looks like it's a very, it's a Korean cast. Um, and I believe one of the writers or directors, I don't know a ton about it, but I believe she's Korean. Um, and it's all focused. It's very steeped in Korean, lore and mythology, and obviously they're K-pop. So they're K-pop singers who are demon hunters, and it's exactly what it sounds like, and it's fabulous. It's so fantastic.
Love it when the
Um,
name is the premise and that's enough. Like there was a Netflix show that was a warrior nun, and I was like, sold.
uh,
That's all I need.
yeah.
I'll check that out.
Is this like the lesbian vampires where you're like, okay,
Yes, I
that's all you need to tell me about it. I'm
yeah,
good.
my series, I should have just named it Lesbian Vampires, because people hear that they're like, oh, that's what I want to read about. I'm like, oh, and I tried to be clever. Like, no, I should have just said lesbian. The third one has lesbian vampire librarians in this really important scene, and I'm like, I should have just named the book Lesbian Vampire Librarians. Everybody wants to read about lesbian vampire librarians,
I don't know anybody who wouldn't.
right? Well, I mean, yeah, it's all the great things. So so
Um,
well, yeah. What else have you
oh,
been reading lately that's been a relief?
well, I was just gonna give a plug to this book reviewer who her kind of platform is called Reads with Rachel. She's out of Florida, and a couple of like in addition to doing fantastic book reviews, one of the things that she really does a lot of work on is fighting against book banning,
Mm,
and she goes hard. She goes to school board meetings. She confronts people who are at school boards trying to get books banned, and kind of publicly confronts them and makes them go through their rationale of why they're trying to ban books that they haven't read from schools that their kids don't go to.
yeah.
Um, and so she is just phenomenal. And anything, for the bookish community, Reads with Rachel if you like sci-fi fantasy, and I think her taste is more towards YA, but occasionally like she will read she reads a lot of different kind of things.
Yeah, well, and
So
that battle against the book banners is part and parcel of. I'm on the leadership team of Publishing Professionals Against Book Bans, which is kind of the sibling organization of Authors Against Book Bans, because we're recognizing some of the banning is going to happen in this very hidden way within the publishing
mhm,
industry if we're not really careful, where people will say, I'm rejecting your book and I'm not telling you why. And really that's a book ban, right? And
mhm.
the company is saying because we're afraid of the administration. So figuring out how we can help support publishers to stand up. And one of the things we've been talking about is being more proactive. So sending people to school board meetings to say, hey, I'm showing up before the banners show up, to say, create some policy that protects, and again, finding that joy, being proactive.
Yep.
Go to your school board and say, do you have a robust policy that makes sure that no single individual can come in and take away books from my child? Do that now. Don't wait.
Well, yeah, I would definitely say like if you want to reach out to her and kind of, she's already been doing a ton of work in that area just independently, and I don't think with a lot of backup. But I mean, it's Florida. It's basically ground zero for book banning. So,
Oh. Well, let's go to our commercial break real quick. And then when we get back, I want to ask you what you've been daydreaming about. NotAPipePublishing is excited to announce our huge summer sale. Everything on our online store is 25% off. Let's face it, it's hot. So read a great book in the shade, wear a new shirt to the barbecue, sport the merch, and save. Share this with all your bookish friends. bit.ly/NAP store. bit.ly/capital N, lowercase a, capital P, lowercase store. Fascist purges always begin with books. If you can't imagine a better future, you'll never fight for one.
At a time when oligarchs and politicians are trying to divide us, to scare us, to silence us, it's more important than ever to speak up, even when it sometimes feels like screaming into the void.
Celebrations of established foundations all of a sudden screeching, discordant, as the preachers become ignored by the God they adore, pathetic and
anti-fascist literature is
and the
one way
mumbling
we
of their
fight back
last
against the
speech.
rising tide of hatred and ignorance that seeks to drown the sparks of empathy, community, and curiosity that are the birthright of all human beings.
And then maybe you understand. Never let them silence your voice. Never let them push you down. And never forget that your mommy loves you with every
Through our
fiber.
stories and poems, we articulate our love for each other, our desire for justice, our need for freedom, and our determination to make a stand.
The seductive depths of the ocean are more appealing than physical contact with either of them. A mental stream of David Attenborough narration carries her through the awkwardness. Here, the larger of the two apex
Volume 1,
predators
The Antifa Lit Journal, begins with Rachel A. Rosen's brilliant What If We Kissed While Sinking a Billionaire's Yacht, and takes the reader on a journey through rage, fear, and despair to a place of grace, hope, and motivation.
Fascists are like bindweed and blackberry in the garden. You can't eradicate them, but if you stay on top of your reading, you can keep them from taking over.
By itself, it's not enough, but no single effort is. We must come together and embrace one another.
Media. The Enriquez kids came to my daycare until their dad got disappeared, Dolores said. Where were the signs and the singing when my brother died?
Protest, boycott, strike, demand your representatives do more, protect the vulnerable, and support the people who are fighting alongside you through their art.
The kind who sits comfortably where evil meets idiocy and drinks up what he's fed through tubes painted red like the doors of those they tell us are better off dead.
Back our Kickstarter and help us make the Antifa Lit Journal into the kind of community that will outlast the current fascist regime. Fight fascism with your voice while you still can.
So welcome back, everyone. I'm here with MK Martin. And when you have been daydreaming, what have you been daydreaming about lately?
So I have been, I guess, daydreaming a lot about the climate crisis, and sort of, I think it's inspired by watching the U.S. keep being hit by, I think it was 3 or 4 kind of, they're called once in a thousand year floods, and I was like, well, if we have 4 in the same week, then I feel like that once in a thousand years might be a bit of a misnomer. And then there's also been a lot of tornadoes, unseasonable, kind of starting early, hitting places where they've never hit before. Some tornadoes at night, which, is fairly unusual, even in Tornado Alley. And then even in Europe, Europe is experiencing a lot of heat waves. I was talking to a friend of mine who's in the UK, and she was saying, a friend of hers, he's originally from Saudi Arabia, and he was saying, I'm an Arab and this is too hot for me in the UK. And so I've been thinking a lot about the climate crisis, and then that kind of, I guess, inspires me to think a lot about like cli-fi. So, in sci-fi, there's a subgenre called cli-fi, which is kind of climate fiction. Either it gets worse or it gets better, or how does it get worse or how does it get better, or if this or that kind of gets extended, what's the natural outgrowth like? So yeah, I think climate crisis has been on my mind a lot.
Oh yeah, I love that. I wrote a novel that I set 100 years in the future, and this was before the term cli-fi was a term, but that was very much on my mind. And so I thought about, if given time, how would people kind of redesign cities in a world where you do have these massive superstorms, and it's just something that would have been, we would go, oh my gosh, that's a Hurricane Katrina. And they're like, sometimes those hit in every other week, because the climate's broken. And so the people in this futuristic world build their cities, build their buildings like almost like eggs. And you see some of these designs of egg shape, because they don't have the same wind shear. Like you can, and every building has a subway system connected to it, because sometimes you just cannot go up on the surface. Either it's too hot or it's too cold. And so you have to redesign the way you live and the way you build infrastructure, knowing the climate's cracked. And I think that's interesting to think about. How will we change our day-to-day lives? Because we will not solve this magically. When you break something, it takes longer to fix it than to break it, right? And we broke the climate, and it's going to take a long time to repair itself. And in the meantime, how are we going to change the way we live? So I daydream about that as well. I think that'll be really interesting to see. And maybe it does mean more public transportation, more subways, build more subways.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure we have time for your big announcement. What is going on with you in terms of your writing career?
Yay. Okay. So the big announcement, which is happening either today or tomorrow, depending on when you're seeing this. So it's July 22nd. The third and final installment of my trilogy that started with Survivors Club is coming out, and it's called New Avalon Rangers. Very excited about that. This is the first one. Hello. Oh, you can't quite see it. It's blending into the background.
Yeah, there we go.
There we go. You can mostly see it.
Tell everybody who the artist is, because
so the artist is my husband, and yeah, he used to do a lot more art than he's doing now. He's kind of getting back into it after a lull, but it's great because then I have so much input on the cover. But really what happens is I'm like, make a good cover and it has to have these three things. And then he just goes off and does some kind of artistic magic because I'm not gifted visually. And then it comes back. And here's the second book. You can compare. It's got a lot of similar elements. So, but a slightly different color. And then the third book, which is out today or tomorrow. Ta-da!
So I wanted to ask you about this series. I don't want to spoil anything for anybody, but this is, I mean, you'll know this from the back cover copy. This is tentacled monsters, a plague of tentacled mutations affect humans and they become these tentacled monsters. And we're watching this progression from, this is something that is very isolated. We don't want it to get out. Okay, it gets out. Okay, how is the humanity going to react to this? I wanted to ask you about the unintentional way that this has actually, matched up with or been disconnected from what has gone on in the world over the course of the writing of this series.
Yeah. So, okay. So, as you know, I wrote the first book before the COVID pandemic. And at that point, the kind of idea that we would have a viral pandemic that would sweep the world was, it was really the realm of science fiction. We're like, no, we've got, these great international medical agencies, and, nothing like that will ever happen. And I had just spent way too much time watching the Contagion movie, reading Michael Crichton books, and playing Resident Evil. And so like all of that stewed together in my brain, and I'm like, oh. So I wrote the first book, and I would say it's pretty hot and heavy into like kind of the gross out factor. Like it's very much of the monsters are the thing in the first book. And then the second book I think is more of, I can't remember, I think it might have been Karen Eisenbray, who's one of the other Not a Pipe authors, who described it as a high stakes road trip at the end of the world.
Yes.
And it's like, oh, that's amazing. I totally wish I'd come up with that myself, but it's brilliant. And so it really is, it's kind of a journey story. Like there's a lot of traveling to and fro and kind of getting to see different parts of mostly the US, as different things fall apart, and how does society fall apart, and kind of who rallies together, and who kind of descends into Lord of the Flies. Because one of the things that I've been looking at is there's been a lot of research that shows that human beings in these disaster situations, it's not so much Lord of the Flies. Like our tendency is to actually help each other out. And I wanted that to be, there's a lot of these sort of Mad Max kind of post-apocalyptic stories where it's just everything is brutal, everybody is bad. And I was like, no, I'm going to have a story that's more in line with a little, it's still sci-fi, but it's more in line with reality, where people help each other out. People, who have resources will take along people that they, I think in one case there's a child who's he's been abandoned, or he's lost his family, and he's sort of picked up by one group and then taken along, and they have no reason to take care of him, they just do, because that's the thing that you do.
Yeah, and I like that road trip metaphor, because one of the things that, if you've ever gone on a road trip in our universe, you get to know people really well. And
Yeah.
where the characters really get developed over the course of this. I mean, I think did a very good job of developing really interesting characters in the first one, but they're faced with such an immediate crisis that we get to know them in a moment. This is who they are. And then in the second one, because they're on this journey, we get to see them change more, because they're road trips are revealing.
They are very revealing.
And so
I think the other thing is, I will say, like, I feel like myself as a writer, and hopefully this is the case with every writer, is every book gets a little bit better. So it's not to say that the first book isn't brilliant and you shouldn't buy it, but as brilliant and wonderful as the first book is, the second book is even better.
So I've got third in my trilogy coming out. That's the first time I've ever written a trilogy, and I don't know if you've felt this, because one of the tensions is we have to get people to read the first one, right? Because they're not going to just book 3, probably. You try and make it so it could stand alone, but I'm not encouraging anybody, start my trilogy with book 3. And I would say for yours, definitely start with book 1, read all 3.
Yeah.
But then we, as the authors, are going, but also you just have to trust me. I got to be a better writer by book 3. Like book 3 is,
so you're like, just get through book 1. It's fine.
It's better.
Book 2 is better. Book 3 is kind of like, it's kind of great.
People say to me, which of your books is the best? And I'm like, it better be the most recent. Or
it's usually the most recent. Yeah.
Like, I want it to be the most recent book. But this one, so the third book, which I love so much, how do you feel like that has reflected or been affected by a kind of post-COVID world? Because you were writing that one during COVID and then into the time period afterwards?
Yeah. So I think with this one, at the outset of starting to write this, one of the things that I wanted to do is I wanted to write an apocalypse, what I think of as from beginning to end, of kind of like we have the thing that kicks off the apocalypse, society crumbles, and then we also get to see people recovering from it. Because I think a lot of times in post-apocalyptic, the subgenre, you'll either have kind of one of two things. Either the event has happened so long ago that nobody really remembers what it is, and it's just the event. Like I think the Shannara series is pretty similar to that, where there was like an event, thousands of years ago, and we don't know what happened, but it was bad.
Yeah.
Or the event is ongoing and it's so bad that nobody lives at the end, and you're just reading The Road by Cormac McCarthy, and you're like, well, now I'm critically depressed. Thank you, sir. Which it's a great book, good movie, all of that kind of stuff. Protect your mental health. It's not cheery.
I read that book was shortly after my son was born, so I'm a baby,
Oh no.
and I'm reading, it was book of the year, it won the Pulitzer. I should really read this thing, and I'm holding my infant, going, "Have I just done a horrible thing bringing you into this world?" It was not a good thing to be reading while holding a baby, my infant son.
Yeah, you're like,
Love it,
oh
but
yeah.
it was a powerful emotional experience to be going.
It is, yeah.
A child in
And
this world isn't courageous; it's actually cowardly. It was grim.
it does make you question some things about reproducing. You're like, oh yeah, maybe not great. But anyways, because of that, it's either 1,000 years ago or we all die in the end of it and it's hopeless. I wanted to do something where it is a person who's starting out at the beginning of it and goes through all of it, and then we do recover, because I think the post-apocalypse, the post part of it, is the thing that I wanted to focus on in book 3. Is yes, all of these things have happened. Yes, society has crumbled, and we've all been through hell and back. But how do you recover from that? And so, kind of, book 3 is almost more of there's still monsters and there's still threat and adventure and all of that, but it's more about how does society rebuild? How do we move on from this great, huge, massive collective trauma? And maybe it was just me trying to figure out, well, how do I move on from all of the great, huge, massive collective traumas that I've been through?
Well, and one of the things that I found very, real about it, this is a world with tentacled monsters, right? But one of the things that felt realistic in this world of tentacled monsters is, as people are saying, I need order, they are looking for order in different ways. And so some people say, oh, I need order, and order is going to come about through kind of a hierarchical, structured society. And other people are saying, I need order, and that's going to come out, our protagonists, through really building a community that's very much like a large family, right? Where we care about one another. And then we have this other community that's, we're going to go to traditional values. We're going to lean back into kind of our racism and our sexism and will and our othering, and that will provide us with order. And I found that very believable. Like, these are the ways that people in crisis go. Some people go, I need to hold on to the people who are closest to me, and then some people go, no, I need rules, and then some people go, no, I need my priors, my hatreds, to organize as organizing principles for society. And how do those groups then navigate that? And of course, it's going to lead to conflict. You cannot have a society that says we want to be loving and a society that says we're organized around who we hate. Like, those two societies will be at odds. And so, that I think that came across very, very well in this book. I encourage folks to check it out. It's so good.
Well, thank you.
So where can folks find you? Where's the best place to find out more about you online and connect with you that way?
Probably my webpage is the easiest place to find me. That's just at MK Martin Writer. That's WRITER, not writer like a horse, .com. Or social media. I'm most active on Blue Sky. I do have accounts on other places, but that's the one that I'm most on.
That's the go-to now. It is interesting. That's changed for me. Like, I used to be really active on the site now ridiculously known as X, and I go there and post, but I know I'm not engaged in an authentic way. I'm just But like, where I'm engaging with folks tends to be Blue Sky and Threads now. Those just feel like much healthier places. So yeah, definitely connect with MK Martin on at Blue Sky, mkmartinwriter .com and on Blue Sky. That's a good follow. You're a good follow.
Yeah, I try to just keep it consistent, so you can find me wherever with just MK Martin Writer.
Yeah. So what is in your to read pile? We mentioned a couple of titles that you've got, but what else are you looking forward to?
Yeah, so I have I can't say that, someone to build a nest in, but do read it. It's so fantastic. The Murderbot series, and then I have been waiting forever. I have my American friends and family who are supposed to, and every trip this kind of happens of like, what should I bring you from America? And I'm like, bring me books 2 and 3 of the series Between Earth and Sky by Rebecca Roanhorse.
And I have not read these. So what's this series?
It's so good. It's so good. So the first one is called Black Sun, SUN Sun. And it's kind of pre-Columbus era Mesoamerica. And it's just very steeped in the lore. And I think it's been a couple of years since I read the first book because my American friends have been letting me down so much. But I think there's 3 points of view. There's kind of, these different characters that are spiraling around each other, and it's all sort of revolving around making, there's a prophecy and then kind of trying to make that prophecy come true or prevent that prophecy from happening. And it's just fantastic. It's one. So I will also recommend, because it has a lot of great rep for non-binary genders, because the society recognized there is a difference between, it's not just him or her, there's him, her, and something else.
Yeah.
And as we know, gender is a product of the culture and the time that you live in.
Yeah, as writers, we should be really thoughtful about that. If you're setting in another universe, it does not need to have our genders because our genders are cultural constructions. So how does that culture define gender? That's cool. That she was thoughtful about that.
Yeah, so that one's great. And then the other one that is on my to be read list, it's kind of been boosted to the top because I've heard great things about it, is The River Has Roots by Amal El Motar. I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly. I believe she's a Pakistani American author, or Pakistani by heritage. I'm not sure where she lives.
The River Has Roots. I'll have to check.
The River Has Roots. Yep.
Excellent. Before we get to our advice for folks going into this next week, there are some people I need to thank. Thanks to the artist Max Oakland, who reached out and provided one of his songs for our intro song, I Prefer the Dusk. Let Max know you like it by following him on Twitter at Max Oakland with 3 Ds. Thanks to the author Stephen E. Scribner, who's the author of the Ton Fantasy series and makes music under the name S. Eric Scribner, for his song A Poem from the album Pianosphere. We used that during the ad break. If you make music and you would like your song used on the show, I'd love to highlight a listener's work like Max's or Steven's song, so email me about that. Thanks to Doug, the producer, for making this show sound good and taking the blame when it doesn't. We appreciate you, Doug. Thank you for that. And I can't forget to mention, Writers Not Writing is a production of NotAPipePublishing, so please go to NotAPipePublishing.com. Check out the amazing books written by writers who didn't procrastinate too much. Check out MK Martin's books, which are there on the site right now at a discount, so you can get your whole trilogy there. And when you read one of Molly's books, please leave a review. Reviews really matter, and so help out that way. It doesn't take you a lot of time. And similarly for this show, click that little thumbs up button an odd number of times. We would appreciate that. Okay, so. I've been telling everybody, every week, please remember, all writing is political, all speaking is political, and choosing not to use your voice is also a political act because it maintains the status quo. So use your voice to make the world a better place. And Molly, what's your advice for everybody as they're going into their week?
So I will second that and say, the fascists want to steal our joy, so don't let them. Create silly things, write happy endings, paint using bright colors. It's okay to take a break. Put on your oxygen mask before helping others. and self-care so that you have the energy to care for others.
Yes. Yes. Taking a break is a political act so that you can continue the fight. Thank you so much for being here. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks for having me, Ben.
Here's a tiny bit of our bonus segment. Become a member of my Patreon and you can get the whole thing with no ads. So when did you get into the, kind of looking into these constructed languages? Was this during your linguistics education?
No, it was actually Dune.
No, right. Was it? Yes.
So I think I was, probably 14 or 15 when I first read it. And just the idea as I was going along, I was like, wait a minute, this isn't English, and just realizing that this was a language that had been constructed and put into the book. And I loved it so much. And I didn't know what it was called. And then when I did study linguistics, then I learned, that this is a whole thing that you can do. And I have helped authors in the past do create languages for their book. So one of the series that I worked on, the author had it, they were inspired by a certain group of people in a certain time period. And I said, okay, I can look at what are the attested, what do we know about that language in that time period? We have some words, we have some sounds, we have some things. And then knowing what I know about linguistics, I would say, okay, if we have, this set of sounds, then we probably have these ones as well, or we absolutely wouldn't have these ones. So I could kind of, take it from there and then just make a language that was critical to the plot of the book because in the book,
If I take my time.